All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about the financial system, but probably not in the way you're used to. Forget the stock tickers, forget the endless charts. We're going to look at the whole thing in a completely new light, not as a machine, but as a living, breathing ecosystem. So, to really get where we're headed, you got to understand where we've been. For decades, really, the standard textbook way of thinking about finance has been to see it as something called a veil. Okay, so what does that even mean, finance as a veil? Well, you're basically looking at a perfect, idealized world. In this view, finance is just a neutral go-between. Think of it like a perfect plumbing system, totally invisible, that just moves money from people who save to people who invest, and it doesn't actually change the real economy one bit. The whole idea rests on these huge assumptions, right? That markets have everything covered, that everyone knows everything they need to know. And if all that's true, then how the financial system is actually built, well, it just doesn't matter. It's a really clean, simple model, a nice benchmark to have. But, I mean, come on. We all know the real world doesn't work like that, right? The theory is beautiful, but reality is messy. So that begs the really big question. What happens when that perfect, invisible veil starts to tear? And this is where everything starts to change. This is the moment we have to shift our whole perspective. Because the second you start admitting what the real world is actually like, that whole idea of finance being neutral, it just completely falls apart. And here's the breakdown of why that is. I mean, think about it. In the real world, is information ever perfect? No way. Some people always know more than others. Can you write a contract that covers every single thing that could possibly happen in the future? Of course not. And then you have these huge ripple effects, externalities, where the actions of one company can impact the whole system. The minute you accept these things as true, you get to the real kicker. The structure of the financial system, how it's actually designed, stops being this irrelevant detail and becomes, well, absolutely decisive. It shapes everything. So, if that old model is broken, what do we replace it with? Well, we need a new way to think, a more powerful metaphor. And that means it's time to stop thinking about finance as a bunch of separate markets and start seeing it for what it is, a deeply interconnected ecosystem. And look, this is a huge shift in thinking. The old way was all about prices and supply and demand finding a nice, neat balance. But this new ecosystem view, it's totally different. It says the big outcomes, like whether the whole system is fragile or resilient, aren't planned by some genius at the top. Instead, they just emerge. They bubble up from all the messy interactions between all the different parts. And in that world, the architecture, the design of the system, isn't just a side note. It's literally everything. Okay, so if finance really is an ecosystem, that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? How is it structured? If we're going to use this metaphor, we're going to need a map. We need some way to make sense of its fundamental design. And this is where we get to the heart of it. The framework we're exploring today proposes a new kind of map, a new architectural model. It breaks the entire financial ecosystem down into 5 distinct but deeply interconnected layers. Okay, layer 1, information. You can think of this as the bedrock of the whole system. We're talking about everything from stock prices and credit ratings to big picture economic data. The quality of this info, how transparent it is, that affects literally every single decision made from here on up. Next up, we've got infrastructure. This is the nuts and bolts, the essential plumbing of the system. We're talking about payment systems, clearinghouses, all the stuff that makes sure transactions actually happen. This layer doesn't decide where money goes, but without it, money can't go anywhere at all. Then you've got layer 3, innovation. This is the exciting part, right? It's what pushes the boundaries of what's even possible in finance. Think new derivatives, wild new fintech apps, you name it. It's the engine of change, for sure. But, as we're about to see, all that change can bring its own set of problems. Layer number 4 is integration. This is all about how connected everything is. How do different markets talk to each other? What about connections across borders or even over time? Now, more connection is good, right? It helps things scale up, you can diversify, but it's a double-edged sword. That same connectivity is also the superhighway for a crisis to spread. And finally, layer 5, governance. Now hold on, this is not about some single all-powerful regulator pulling all the strings. It's something much deeper. It's the underlying logic of the system, the rules of the game, the incentives, the social norms that tries to keep this whole complicated thing from flying apart. It's about coherence, not control. So here's the most important thing to get about this model. These 5 layers, they are not a stack. It's not a hierarchy where one is more important than the other. They are all happening at the same time, all interconnected, constantly interacting with each other. The real magic and the real danger happens at the interfaces, where these layers meet. A problem in one layer can easily bleed over and cause a massive cascade across the whole ecosystem.
Okay, so once you start to see finance this way, as this designed system of interacting layers, you arrive at a really profound conclusion. And it's this: there are no perfect solutions. There's no silver bullet. There are only trade-offs.
And this is the big one, the classic trade-off: efficiency versus resilience. Think about it. You can design a system to be super efficient, right? Lightning fast, low cost, everything tightly connected. But the very things you do to make it efficient, like getting rid of extra buffers or backup systems, are the exact things that make it fragile. You strip out the resilience that lets it absorb a shock. You just can't have maximum efficiency and maximum resilience at the same time. You have to choose.
And this isn't just about efficiency and resilience. This idea of trade-offs is everywhere in the ecosystem. You want more global integration for bigger scale? Great, but that makes it way harder to stop a crisis from spreading. You want tons of rapid innovation? Cool, but say goodbye to some of your stability and predictability. So the real job of designing a financial system isn't about finding some perfect, final solution. It's about consciously and continuously managing these tensions that are never, ever going away. Which brings us to the final big idea. If you can't perfect the system and you know you can't get rid of these trade-offs, then what in the world is the goal? The answer requires a totally different mindset. It's a shift away from thinking about control and toward thinking about stewardship. There's a quote from the source material that just nails this. It says, "Design precedes governance conceptually. Governance cannot fully compensate for poor design." What that means is the basic architecture of the system, how it's built, is what really matters. You can't just come in later and slap on a bunch of new rules to fix a fundamentally flawed design. Your governance, your rules, can only operate within the space that the initial design allows. And that right there is the big takeaway. The system is just too complex to be controlled from the top down. The trade-offs are permanent, so the goal can't be some one-and-done fix. It has to be this process of ongoing, adaptive, responsible management. The right metaphor isn't an architect who creates a perfect blueprint and walks away. It's more like a gardener who is constantly tending to the health of this complex, living ecosystem. So that leaves us with one last and maybe most important question. If our financial system really is this designed ecosystem full of permanent trade-offs, and if it needs constant, careful stewardship to stay healthy, who are the stewards? Who's actually doing the gardening? That's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks for tuning in.